Welcome back to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. Well, I hope everybody had a great Easter and a worshipful one, because if you did, your best life is yet to come. This one is just a minor inconvenience. Folks, for the first time in my life, I see a man in the presidency with Trump that is worthy of the title. I have been a student of politics and American history for 7 decades, and I have given the policies that have been implemented deep analysis. Much of what I have experienced, and not just believe, but know firsthand, and not simply hearsay, has nearly destroyed a country because of the malfeasance and malpractice of those who were more interested in their legacy than they were the health of a nation and its people. I'm privileged to have at least seen once in my lifetime a president of such leadership caliber and intelligence as I have with Donald Trump. I was and am a big fan of Ronald Reagan, and he had the right policies, but he didn't have the strength of Trump, and Nancy, his wife, was more concerned about his legacy than making the sacrifices necessary to get the job done. Of course, he had a Democrat Congress to deal with too, which complicated things. I've listened to hundreds of Trump's news interviews, and I believe at this point he's probably had more interviews than any other president in history. He is exquisitely adept at answering questions, and he has never once been stumped by those who hate him and want to destroy him. If it's possible for you to look at the man objectively and his policies, you have to admit that this country has never been in safer nor more competent hands. He took out the Venezuelan communist dictator Maduro threat in Venezuela, and now Cuba is collapsing, and the rest of South America is having a conservative wave and moving away from socialism and communism. He has destroyed the number one sponsor of terrorism around the world, causing the deaths of thousands of Americans and other people around the world, and he did it by bombing Iran. No other president has had the guts to do that. And I'm eternally grateful that this man has sacrificed so much. In fact, our country and the citizens of America have gained so much. And Trump hasn't gained anything. He's actually taken a hit financially and otherwise. As an attorney of 45 years, I've been trained to be a man that looks at the facts and could care less what someone thinks about a situation. There's a right and a wrong in this world. There's a good and there is an evil. And there's a smart and then there's a stupid. Anyone who cannot objectively look at the man Trump, the policies he's implemented, and the security that he has brought to the nation and say that Trump has not been good for our country is wrong, evil, and stupid. These leftist reprobates in Congress and around the country are a resentful, self-centered, self-absorbed, low IQ, narcissistic group who have less worth and benefit than my dog. Now, some Christians might get squeamish about that, but let me tell you, let me put it this way. If you claim to be a Christian but support the Democrat platform, which contains everything that God hates, then you're on your way to hell anyway. And you are not a Christian in my book, and you are not my concern. You have earned your judgment. With all the information that is out there on the internet and available, ignorance is no longer an excuse. In fact, the Bible says no one will be with excuse. Now, the American people are on the cusp of living in the best times of this country's history, and to live their life in liberty and happiness and prosper as like no other time before. Don't screw it up. Smart people know how to protect themselves from bad policies and bad politicians and bad government. But if you don't fit into that category and you continue to support Democrats that have never had anything good to offer, nor anything good that has succeeded, then you have earned and deserve the suffering that comes your way. Moreover, I don't need to engage in the exercise of fake compassion for the approval of others, nor for my validity, because I know the truth and live in the truth, and therefore care nothing about others' opinions of me. I've been fortunate enough to be able to be generous with others and generally compassionate toward those who are in need because of no fault of their own. I'm a good steward of my time and money, and I use the brain that God has given me to make the right decisions and choices. Now, I have studied this man, Trump, and I have intensely listened to his words, looked into his eyes, Watch the inflection of his voice and the features of his face as he speaks. We've been blessed to have such a unique person as he, who has made the most brilliant political chess moves that I've ever seen. I know, I've been a student of this for over 30 years. I know no man in my 7-decade history who has ever endured as much, has been wrongly hated as much, yet persevered, exercised the right moves and discretion, and all for the benefit of the people. He saved us all from having our kids forcibly transgendered. He's kept men out of women's sports and women's bathrooms. He closed the borders and deported illegal criminal aliens, those who had already been charged with crimes of murder and rape. And given the time and patience that people need to have, he will create an economy as he did in his first term. But as with the first term, he had to undo the damage of Obama. And now he's having to undo the damage of Biden. In both of those situations, the people caused their own misery. So don't be a fool and hate a man because a liberal leftist Democrat told you to. Exercise the brain that God gave you and look at the goodness in this man and the great things that he is doing for you in this country. And by the way, have a little patience for a change because you voted for your unaffordability when you voted for Biden and when you voted for Obama. So let's cut this kind of crap out. Take a look in the mirror and see the person who basically caused their own unaffordability. This man needs some time and he deserves it. Now, here's a traitor in his own words, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. As so many of you have heard me remark, one of the most traitorous men in the U.S. Senate, that is Chris Murphy of Connecticut, he committed one of the worst, what they call the Kinsley gaffes ever. A Kinsley gaffe refers to when a politician accidentally tells the truth, specifically one they are not supposed to say publicly. Unlike a simple slip of the tongue, it's an inadvertent and major reveal of a politician's genuine thoughts or an admission of their party's undisclosed positions or motivations. As reported by Dale Wilcox in Breitbart News, Senator Murphy, while responding to a question about the status of his party's longstanding push for illegal alien amnesty, he said, well, Chris, referring to the person that was interviewing him, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So you are right that has been the Democrat strategy for 30 years, maybe, and it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are now in this country.
The negotiation didn't have a path to citizenship. It was entirely on their terms in order to get Ukraine funded, right?
Well, Chris, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So right. You are right that has been the Democratic strategy for 30 years, maybe, and it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are in this country.
Wow, folks, he said it. He's been saying what we've been trying to beat into everybody's head for years. Wake up, folks, the Democrat Party and all of them are your enemy. They are America's enemy. All you have to do is read their platform, listen to what they say, and look at the consequences of their policies. I have told you many times before that the Democrats care nothing for you, only their power to rule over you. As atheists, they want you to worship government and they want to be your God so as to be able to command you to think and live the way that they dictate. The Democrats have been planning to flood the country with low IQ, easily manipulable migrants who will vote for them since the 1960s. I've said that in previous podcasts, and I gave you the history on that. Just look at what happened recently in Minneapolis. The Attorney General, Keith Ellison, was caught on tape telling the Somalis, a group of Somalis, that the money will continue to flow to them, but he needs their votes. The Democrats need their votes. This is illegal, and it's already been suggested that he be indicted. And don't forget, up to $19 billion were fraudulently funneled to the Somalis and the Democrats in Minnesota that is totally controlled by the Democrats, including the judges. Minnesota is as good as a communist state within the United States. And what did Governor Walz say lately? He wanted more Somalis to come to his state when most of them were on welfare and contribute nothing to the state or our nation. Of course, Minnesota and Minneapolis made themselves a sanctuary state and city, and this must be outlawed, folks. It's got to be outlawed around the country. I just can't imagine that the Supreme Court hasn't dealt with this. Here is where our Supreme Court has failed us. Sanctuary should have been outlawed years ago, as sanctuary legislation is nothing more than the nullification of federal law, which is exactly what the Confederacy did prior to the Civil War. Wake up. Do you see when I say we are heading for Civil War 2.0? Sanctuary policies now exist, and get this, they exist in 1,003 jurisdictions, 19 states in the District of Columbia. They issue driver's license to illegals so they can vote, and 20 states grant them in-state tuition subsidies. The net result is that 18.6 million illegal aliens now reside in the U.S., costing taxpayers $150 billion. And you dare complain about affordability and then voting for a Democrat who has caused your problems? Then if you do that, then you deserve your suffering. And you don't have any of my sympathy. This is clear evidence of the accuracy in Senator Murphy's admission that his party elevates the interest of illegal aliens over Americans. Folks, we need to declare war on the Democrat Party and charge them with treason and impose the harshest penalties. Their conduct was not by accident or oversight. It was intentional. If these people get back into power in November, they will reinstitute an open border policy, flood the country with millions of more illegals and criminal aliens, pack the courts, and start reinstituting all of their perverse ideas, such as transgenderism. And they're going to continue to tighten the noose further so that they can eventually drag you all to hell. And how so, you ask? Well, it's here and has been for a while. But Christians were warned about this decades ago. Christian persecution is here, and some countries will jail you if you read from the Bible. Yeah, and many Christians voted for the very people who are now outlawing the Bible. In Europe, for example, they are outlawing the Bible, as I just recently reported about in Finland, when their Supreme Court penalized one of their members of parliament for publishing something in quoting from the Bible 20 years ago. See, these are hateful people. You just have to understand the mindset of the left and the liberal. The same is holding true in Canada. There is no freedom of speech nor religion anymore in Canada. And what most people don't know is there is a tight alliance that Canada now has with China. Canada is a failing country. Trump has been trying to tell you that. You don't know the 1% of it. It has become a narco state, and now a lot of the problems with drugs is coming in from Canada. And basically Canada is falling apart at the seams. And that is why President Trump has been saying what he has with regard to parts of Canada being or becoming the 51st state like Alberta. This is like an Overton window type thing. He's opening the discussion so that you'll pay attention to really what's going on. He was drawing attention to the problem, but many of you thought him crazy. You see, folks, this river runs deep, and there's lots that you don't know. And like the Lord said, my people will perish for a lack of knowledge. Well, what you don't know can kill you. And when Trump says things that you find fantastic, he really has more facts and information behind it than you know. He is signaling to you, so you better get a clue and start thinking and paying attention. We have massive communist and authoritarian problems in the West that have infiltrated governments and cultures around the world. And that's why I have specifically been pointing out to you in various writings and podcasts some of the kingpins like Senator Chris Murphy and others who are attempting legislation to destroy our country. They are the worst of the worst, and they come from atheist enclaves around our country, all blue states. So it's time to wake up, or else you will find yourself being dragged to hell by those people now and in the afterlife, by the people who are demonically influenced and inspired. Ignore the warning at your own peril, but at least you have been informed. Now, I'm calling this next segment the equivalent of a tornado warning to you. I've been listening to all the fanatical Democrat fear-mongering of late, such as Nancy Pelosi saying the Republicans may try to creep into the technology and create a false count in the midterm elections. That's odd. The Democrats already did that to the Republicans. Or Representative Meeks saying that Trump is trying to steal an election. Again, the evidence points to the fact that only Democrats have done that and don't want voter ID. Think about that. They don't want voter ID. Almost 90% of you all think it's a good idea and want it, but your representatives, particularly Democrats, don't. Think about that again. Why would anyone not want you to show your ID to go to vote? You have to show it everywhere else you go. Clearly, they want the millions who crossed the border illegally under Biden to vote for them. Or how about the annoying hemorrhoid Senator Chris Murphy suggesting that Trump is trying to change the election? I could go on and on for days listing all the fear-mongering and fantastical, imaginary, and nefarious things the Democrats are saying that the Republicans are doing. But remember, the Democrats are projectionists. They tell you daily what they are really planning and up to by accusing and projecting upon others that which they are guilty of themselves. Now, I wish the Republicans would actually do the things that they are being accused of, but they are not. So, as a warning to you, and I have said this before, the Democrats are always telling you of what they are up to by their accusations. It's a deflection, and everyone by now should be used to that. They are a traitorous group, and the only way they could come up with these fantasies is because they have already dwelled upon them, and they will employ them just like they did with the Russian hoax and the January 6th insurrection, which if you'll go back and listen to their language months prior to that, they were already introducing the term insurrection into the public's mind because they were going to use it, and they did. Why? Because they were planning on using it later, and they did. Only after Trump got back into office and investigations were conducted in his second term did we find out the fraud and the lies the Democrats tried to cover up. So now you have been warned. So ignore the lies and accusations and fear-mongering of the Democrats leading up to the November elections, as they are all calculated to deceive and alter outcomes. Now let's talk about imbecilic morons destroying capitalism. Now I'm going to use a local example here in Louisville, Kentucky to exemplify what we seem to be suffering across our capitalist country, and it is decisions like what I'm about to tell you about that gives capitalism a bad name. Yes, capitalism has raised more people out of poverty than any other economic system known to man. However, we are seeing its weak underbelly, and it lies with the imbecilic morons that matriculate up into executive positions of major corporations that make decisions that have tremendous negative impacts upon the communities where the corporations and the businesses are headquartered and depend upon their staffing. As a corporate attorney, having represented many companies from the Fortune 10 all the way down to the mom and pops, just because you're an executive doesn't imbue you with intelligence, wisdom, or good judgment. I'll give you a couple examples in just a minute. The ones I'm representing now, for the most part, are the cream of the crop. But I have seen too many companies headed up by morons, and as I've said too many times to my colleagues, I'd rather sue the big companies than the big companies than the small ones, because it's easier and they're filled with imbeciles who easily are manipulated. They are the country club types who are legends in their own minds. They have tunnel vision and not very circumspect. And only because they have been around a while for a particular company that they get kicked upstairs where they really don't belong. Sometimes it becomes a little social club and almost resembles the likes of the movie Stepford Wives, where the men in charge think so highly of themselves, drowning in their own arrogance around the bar, talking about how great they are while their submissive wives are robotized to do everything that the men want. Well, folks, we've seen many instances, and more increasingly around the country, where these inept imbeciles in corporate America, these corporate executive positions, making some of the worst decisions that impact communities and the stockholders. We saw it with Bud Light, using the transvestite Dylan Mulvaney to market their beer. And as a consequence, the company lost billions and billions of dollars. Then we saw that morally bankrupt Richard Goodell of the NFL hire Bad Bunny to perform in Spanish at the Super Bowl halftime. It was excused away as being an attempt to broaden their audience. The stupidity, corruption, and leftist drift within corporate America is profound, and with rarity, this is where I find myself aligning with some of the criticisms of the left. Now, allow me to give you an example near and dear to my heart, and I know I speak the sentiments of other community leaders here in Louisville that I have talked to, and in our legislature in the capital of Kentucky, who are thinking of taking some regulatory actions either at the state level or locally, but that is for another discussion at another time. Nevertheless, Louisville is readying itself for the Kentucky Derby, the largest and most famous horse race in the world at 152 years. Just recently, it has become more publicly known and was reported that Churchill Downs, the corporation that is changing the post time for the famous Oaks race to 8:40 p.m. Yes, you heard me correctly, 8:40 p.m. The Oaks is the race that is run the day before the Derby. It is not only famous in its own right, but also is considered the locals' Derby, as the Derby on the first Saturday in May is so international, crowded, and expensive with guests from around the world that to get into the Derby for locals is very difficult. The Derby brings in nearly $500 million to Louisville, Kentucky, and now the corporation wants to change the post time for the Oaks to 8:40 p.m. I have to almost restrain myself to the kind of descriptive words I want to use for this type of decision making, but to the point. Having lived in Louisville all my life and been to the Oaks and Derby dozens of times, by the time post time comes around, which was typically about 5:45 p.m., people are excited and ready to see the race, but tired having already been there most of the day. Then afterwards, they go out to their parties and dinners, filling up the restaurants around town at night. It is like Christmas economically for the city and those who work in the restaurant industry and other establishments around the town. However, who wants to stay at a racetrack until nearly 9 o'clock at night? It's now reported that one of the famous and old standard restaurants in Louisville, Pat's Steakhouse, which has catered to the Derby weekend crowds for 70 years, will be closing its doors for both Oaks on Friday and Derby on Saturday. Who wants to eat a dinner at 9 p.m.? And what restaurant staff wants to be working until midnight, assuming people would even eat that late? These type of poor corporate decisions, and this one, which was made quietly last year and only became more publicly known with Pat's Steakhouse closure, will have an impact on the community that serves the famous Churchill Downs. These type of corporate decisions extend far beyond just what one steakhouse has done. All of the other restaurants and their employees around the city, if they were to stay open, would be having to serve meals after 9 p.m. because it takes time for people to get from the track to their destination. Nearly 100 to 150,000 people attend the Oaks as all the celebrities from Hollywood and around the country and overseas start flying into Louisville to start their partying and celebrations basically on Thursday, and some come in on Friday. The Friday night before Derby is a massive social event that occurs around the city after the traditional Oaks run on Friday before or at or around 6 p.m. What a terrible corporate decision to run the race at 8:40 p.m. I don't know who the morons are that made that decision, but I pretty much know why, which I will not get into at this point, but suffice it to say that the type of decision that has been made will only be detrimental and hollow out Louisville's economy in certain segments and for the sake of revenues elsewhere and for the company and its stockholders. Maybe. That's like a parasite sucking the lifeblood out of its host, and that being the community where Churchill Downs exists. So to the board of Churchill Downs, you can't pack up and move this historic site or race, but if you try to abuse your host city like you are, it's time for you to start paying some compensatory fees and face some new regulations. Having spoken to members of both bodies of the legislature as well as local government officials and other corporate types, they are not fans of those in charge of the Churchill Corporation, the decision that was made, and suffice it to say, we are in a wait-and-see mode. but many of my friends have canceled plans to attend the Oaks race because of the post time. If there is a deleterious effect upon the restaurant and collateral businesses, local action will be taken. Louisville is to the restaurant business as Silicon Valley is to computers. Many national chains have been started here or exist here. You know, I hate government regulations sticking their noses into private business, but there comes a time when companies get so big or that their boards become so infested with imbeciles that their bad decisions impact the community or the country in a negative way, and we cannot allow that to happen by unelected people who have such a negative effect upon private individuals and a community and the voters. I have often said that the remedy in some cases is an ultra vires action to pull a company's certification to do business when they exceed their authority. Now, I'm not saying it would be applicable here, as there are other punitive remedies available, but suffice it to say that this decision that was quietly made last year and now becoming more widely known as the race time nears, it is not popular, and people are waking up to the potential economic impact on the community. I've heard all the arguments on the other side, and they are short-term and bad excuses to justify not doing the civically responsible thing for the community. As I have said to many and to my listeners, I'm concerned about the impact upon restaurants, their staff, and all other collateral businesses that rely on this event, such as many businesses do around the country at Christmas. Some businesses make their profit for the year on singular events like this. If this outrageous, illogical decision has a negative impact, then I will be marching to the Capitol for some relief to take it out of the hide of the company. And there are many there who would have no allegiance to Churchill Downs, particularly with the competition we have in Kentucky between rural and urban representatives. There would not be much love lost between them, I guarantee you that. I also want to know who the morons are that thought of such an outrageous post time for one of the most important events economically for Louisville and the state. There is such a thing as corporate civic responsibility, and if Churchill Downs can't figure that out, then let them feel the pain such that they purge themselves of those in the decision-making process, just as Bud Light had to do. As a Republican in leadership in Louisville and at the state level, I'm going to make sure that the rest of those in leadership in the state and at the local level get a grip on what Churchill Downs has done and demand answers and compensation for the small businesses here in Louisville that may be impacted, such as Pat's Steakhouse. Remember, corporations exist at the pleasure of the state, and there are many tools available that I want to see dusted off and to put a lot of these companies, particularly nationally, back into their lanes, and if they can't or won't, then pull their registration. After all, there are many others out there ready to take their place and to do it the right way. Now let's switch gears here for a minute and let's talk about Kentucky's Governor Andy Beshear, who is dreaming of being president. Believe me, folks, this guy has the intellect of a mail-order degree. But as stupid as he is also ruthless and corrupt. You see, we know what he is like when the cameras are not rolling. And let me remind people that during COVID, he was going around to churches taking pictures of your license plate and arresting anyone that went to church during COVID. And recently, he has been laying claim to various successful measures in Kentucky that he vetoed, such as lowering taxes. It was the supermajority Republican legislature that gave the people of Kentucky good governance. I know from personal experience and knowledge and involvement. Beshear is a radical leftist, just like Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats in Congress. Now here's a picture where he is proudly standing with his constituents and who he panders to. I've used this picture before and will continue doing so, as a picture is worth 1,000 words, and sometimes speaks loudly as this one does. He's no Christian, but he's pandering to the Christians, just like Jimmy Carter did. So don't let this Jimmy Carter fool you again. Armed with the knowledge I had, and upon Beshear's squeaker of a win, I and other legislators set out to protect the state and the people, and we neutered Beshear of power, making him a lame duck governor, which he has been, but he won't let you know that. But that did not stop him from taking credit for the good things that the legislature passed. His vetoes of the good things he is now trying to take credit for is historic. And why? because he has been overridden more times than all of the Kentucky governors in history combined. In the words of Churchill, Beshear is no leader. He's a sheep in sheep's clothing and a modest man who has much to be modest about. If you don't get the point, he has nothing to offer. He's an empty suit and a media and teachers union construct. He has nothing to offer this country. He's nothing but a social climber par excellence and will be totally dependent upon the liberal and the leftist media to make him something that he is not. Don't let him fool you. For the people who have paid attention and know him, he's not really that popular in Kentucky as the national media is trying to make him out to be. He only won the first time by a squeaker of 5,500 votes because our Republican governor at the time wouldn't keep his mouth shut about the teachers union, the radical teachers unions. I don't know one teachers union that is not radical. And our Republican governor at the time was correct, basically with regards to the educational policies, but he wasn't playing political chess very smartly. Then Beshear's reelection was the result of Republicans giving it to him because we bowed the knee to McConnell's pick, who was weak. And as history reveals to us, McConnell had many disastrous picks, such as Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania and Charlie Crist of Florida, both of whom he helped get reelected to the Senate, and within a year later, they switched to the Democrat Party. But I tell you what, sometimes we call the Republican Party the stupid party because of some of the poor chess moves that they make politically. Beshear didn't win because he was such a great, grand, and glorious guy. He's a fraud and a creation of circumstance. So once again, wake up. Let's not let Jimmy Carter back into the White House. Now here's an example of another tolerant liberal Democrat. And hopefully you know I'm being facetious here. James Carville. There's going to be another picture of worth 1,000 words. James Carville, the Democrat consultant to President Clinton and his campaign manager, looks so much like Gollum, doesn't he? The internal evil in some people is just so strong that it shows through on the outside. Carville is and has been one of the most evil and corrupt men in politics for the last 40 years. But just as another example of how violent, resentful, and so retributive he and others like him are, here's what this foul-mouthed being recently said. On Wednesday on the Politicon podcast, Democrat strategist Carville said President Donald Trump, his children, and his children's spouses will face investigations if the Democrats win the midterms. You see, they don't have anything to offer you. They just want retribution. Folks, in the last 10 years, have you heard the Democrats come up with any good ideas? No. Have you heard them talk about anything else but their hatred for one man, that is Trump? No. Why? They have no ideas for making your life better, and they can't resist the evil that dwells within them. Just get a look at this man, Carville. He's as evil on the outside as he is on the inside. They rage like they are possessed by demons. So wake up and pay attention. Now, for my Kentucky friends in the 4th District, where that traitorous rhino Thomas Massie resides and represents them in Congress, he's buddy-buddy with this next guy that I'm going to picture for you. Khanna, an Indian representative of California who is one of the leading radicals on the left that is tearing this country down. Rhino Massie of Kentucky has cozied up to him, as have all the West Coast Marxists. If I had my wish, I would denaturalize Khanna and send him back to India. Think on this. Khanna said and wants to avenge Iran for us taking out their nuclear program. What? Iran is now executing 18-year-olds in sham trials, and now the number of Iranians killed by their regime is up to 45,000, folks. Khanna is an enemy to this country. He needs to be indicted and face a treason trial. Frankly, I'd rather denaturalize him. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter if a trial would result in a verdict. It would expose him to the whole country and let the public know who our enemies and American haters are, particularly in Congress. Okay, one more and I will close, maybe, for today's podcast. Here's another example of a leftist Marxist Democrat representative in the United States House of Representatives from, of all places, Massachusetts. who pretended to be a military strategist and on 3 different segments of Fox News on Easter weekend and Sunday. This moron was given airtime to spout off some of the most inane and insane statements without any adequate cross-examination that would have quickly categorized him as legally insane. This guy is Jake Auchincloss. Now, what a nice authoritarian Nazi name that is. On Fox News with Janet Breen and others, the tape and clip of Hail Auchincloss claimed that Trump had lost the war and that Iran's blockage of the Strait of Hormuz was more powerful than a nuclear bomb. What a jerk. This real Nazi claimed that President Trump, with all of the generals and the military experts who have just executed in just 4 weeks the most successful military exercise in history and against Iran, known as the #1 sponsor of world terrorism, have destroyed its Air Force, Navy, communications, nuclear facilities, and missiles and drones capacity. Yet Mr. Nazi Auchincloss said it was all a disaster and Trump lost the war. He even had the audacity to accuse Trump of being a chicken, talking tough but always backing down. Oh, really, Mr. Nazi? Well, let me remind you that Trump took out Venezuela and arrested and extracted the communist dictator Maduro in less than 24 hours. Then he bombed the nuclear facilities in Iran several months ago, and now he has defanged Iran. This Nazi sissy of a man, Auchincloss, needs to be removed from office, removed from Congress. So he being from Massachusetts, one of the most disconnected from reality populations in the country, but while there is not much hope of doing anything and getting it from the voters there, coming from Massachusetts, it's very doable. Punitive actions against him is very doable with regards to discrediting him, humiliating this Auchincloss to the rest of the country, such that he has no credibility and thus remove him from the public stage metaphorically. What was so annoying is that there was no pushback from Fox News when it would have been so easy. It would have been like child's play. Jake Auchincloss was actually posing and pretending to be a military expert and strategist and was fair game for a takedown with just some simple questions, yet the folks at Fox News gave this moron free pass all weekend. His demeaning and condescending attitude was unbelievable. Here we had just yet another Democrat undermining America and giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Auchincloss was wanting us to be defeated by Iran, and Fox News did nothing to expose this emperor without any clothes. Now, let me just remind everybody that it was Jake Nazi Auchincloss and his party that created the crisis of Iran, which started with Jimmy Carter and has been murdering people for 47 years. These are the types of people that must be purged from American government, because this is not an issue of free speech, but rather them aiding and abetting our country's enemies. If we only had the right people to address the empirically vacant arguments that Auchincloss gave, he could have been discredited, humiliated, and shamed from the public stage within a matter of 10 minutes. But it's apparent that Fox News had another agenda, as I have seen creeping in with some of the other talking heads on Fox News. Just beware, folks, something's happening there as well. Now, here's an update on the traitor Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen, who just said and suggested that Trump may be guilty of war crimes by attacking Iran's infrastructure. Well, let me remind you, Senator Van Hollen, that Joe Biden conducted strikes in at least 5 countries, including Syria and Yemen. Donald Trump ordered strikes in 10 countries in his first term and utilized bunker buster bombs against Iran's infrastructure in 2026. Barack Obama bombed 7 countries: Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and Syria, including extensive airstrikes against ISIS in Iran and Syria. You didn't say anything then, Van Hollen. And then George Bush ordered strikes in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, and Somalia. Lyndon Johnson engaged in extensive bombing of infrastructure in Vietnam. Harry Truman oversaw heavy bombing of North Korea, which surpassed the total tonnage dropped in the Pacific Theater in World War II. Folks, Van Hollen has to go. He's an anti-American, and he's a threat to our security, and his lies are aiding and abetting the enemies, our enemies, by spreading propaganda. He is a propagandist. And for my listeners in his state, you've got to organize yourself and go against this guy. Now, let me give you an update on Representative, again, going back to Khanna of California. Get this is unbelievable. I really do think we've got to take some action against these infidels, as I would call them. We've got to take some action against these anti-Americans. Khanna, during an interview on CNN on Monday, said that there should be a ceasefire in Iran, and we need to make sure that we give Iran an ironclad guarantee that neither Israel nor we will attack again and involve China and Russia in that discussion. Isn't that amazing? Folks, we have to purge ourselves of this mentally insane anti-American type Democrats from government in this country. Can you imagine, after 47 years of terrorism from Iran, Khanna wants to give them a guarantee that we won't defend ourselves? It's time to denaturalize Khanna to India, back to India. Now, he was born here, but his parents brought him, but he needs to be denaturalized and sent back to India. He is a threat to you as much as Iran is. Okay, folks, well, as you can tell, this is a pretty messed up world, but the only cure for this world is Jesus Christ and the church preaching the word. Not pastors preaching opinions, but the word itself. And therein lies your mental health, where you can find your mental health and wellness, not to mention salvation. So I will end with this, because there is too much insanity in the world and too few good people doing what they need to be doing, but they will face their own judgment. I hope everyone had a worshipful Easter, and until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.